The Jets are looking for a second straight upset victory over the Bengals with a backup quarterback on Sunday. How can they pull it off? We'll discuss today on the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Friday, September 23rd, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. This podcast is free, and it's available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening. You'll never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please give the episode a big thumbs up. Helps the channel out, and it helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Our episode today is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And the Jets game starts on Sunday, 1 o'clock Eastern, MetLife Stadium, taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. The great Iron Eagle will be on the call. And the Jets are looking for a second straight upset victory over Cincinnati with a backup quarterback. It was last Halloween, a game that really exemplifies the cliche any given Sunday, because the Bengals were coming in off a huge victory over Baltimore. They were actually in first place in the entire conference at the time. They were number one in the AFC. Jets go into this game with Mike White. If you listened that week, I was very skeptical. I was very down on the Jets. They had one win to that point. They're starting Mike White at quarterback. What do you think's going to happen? Well, the Bengals go on to have a great season. They're going to the Super Bowl. But that was a bump along the road for them, because somehow Mike White threw for 405 yards, and the Jets pulled off an enormous upset of the Bengals. This week, it would not be as shocking to see the Jets win. Now, the Bengals are favored. I think Bengals are a more talented team. Expectations are higher going into the year. But I don't think it would be shocking, because the Jets are playing better entering this game. They're coming off an amazing win last week in Cleveland. Can they keep the momentum going? Bengals are struggling. It was interesting watching the Dallas-Cincinnati game on Sunday, because it seemed to me like a lot of Jets fans were pulling for Cincinnati in that game, because they were afraid that the Bengals coming into 0-2 would be more dangerous. They'd be angry, motivated, and those things could be true. Listen, I would not be shocked to see the Bengals play great this weekend. At some point, you'd think with that level of talent, things are going to work themselves out for Cincinnati. But if I had the choice, I kind of wanted to see the Bengals lose, because I like the idea of them coming in a little bit of disarray, maybe doubting themselves a little bit. And these things, they can go either way. They obviously, you can have a team that plays a really good game after they struggle. You could have a team coming in red hot. I personally would prefer, though, that the Bengals not feel like they have things figured out coming off a win in Dallas. And it's a struggling football team right now. They've lost games to Mitchell Trubisky and Cooper Rush as the quarterback. So it's not like it's that crazy to think Joe Flacco could beat these guys after the quarterbacks they've lost to the first 2 weeks of the season. Now, it is going to require a great effort for the Jets, because they are underdogs. Cincinnati is more talented. And Cincinnati has a very explosive offense, as we know. And this is the first game of the season where I really think we're testing out the theory of this defense, because the Jets prioritize certain areas in the offseason, and I think that they prioritize the correct areas. I think that the areas where they've tried to build this thing up, they're the areas built to stop most teams. And that's, first of all, the corners. You've got Sauce Gardner, you have DJ Reed. This is going to be a much tougher test than either of them have had the first 2 weeks. With all due respect to Amari Cooper, who had a lot of success working, not so much against the corners, but working other parts of the Jets' zone defenses. This is the type of game, though, that the Jets went out and got 2 corners for. That's why they paid DJ Reed, not a huge money, but still a decent free agent contract. And this is why they drafted Sauce Gardner 4th overall. They want guys who can match up against elite level receivers. And the Bengals have 2. They have 2 in Jamar Chase and in T. Higgins. And one of the challenges when you face Cincinnati is, if your number one corner plays Chase, Higgins is going to have a great matchup, because Higgins is a number 1 receiver in his own right. And he gets matched up against a lot of number 2 corners. The Jets have, in theory, 2 guys on the outside who can match up with them. They're going to need to play big games. You know, the first week they were excellent against Baltimore, but Baltimore really doesn't have many big play receivers. Cleveland has Cooper, and Cooper had a good game, but it wasn't really against Sauce or DJ. although Sauce kind of busted a coverage in the end zone that led to a touchdown. This is the game you get these corners for, and they need to come up big. Listen, guys like Jamar Chase, guys like T. Higgins, they're going to make plays. They're going to score points. They're going to put points on the board. But the question is whether these corners can hold their own. Can they match up? Is it going to be a case where they're lighting up the scoreboard all day, a bunch of 50-yard touchdowns, or are the Jets going to at least hold them in check a little bit? And that's why you pay these corners. In today's NFL, I still think corners really matter. There are not many guys who can match up one-on-one. And I would expect, especially on third downs, that those are going to be the matchups that win or lose the game for the Jets. Because on first and second down, the Jets, the Jets defense is the Jets defense. They're not really going to change it based on matchups. But on third down, that's when Salah likes to blitz. It's like when they like to get after the quarterback. Jets need corners who can hold up one-on-one against these receivers. So that's a key matchup. And the other key is the defensive line. Jets have spent really 2 years, but I talked about what they did in the offseason. Jets have really spent 2 years building up this defensive line to get after the quarterback. And the Bengals, they have some issues on the offensive line. Lael Collins' status for this game is unclear. He's dealing with an injury. Last year, it was one of the weak links on the team. And the other thing about Cincinnati, Joe Burrow, as promising a young quarterback as there is in the league, there is one issue with him. And it might only be one issue, but he does have one issue. He does have a tendency to take sacks he should not take. He does have a tendency to hold the ball a little bit too long at times. And there could be some opportunities, especially if those corners are able to hold their own, because Burrow's going to be looking for Chase, he's going to be looking for Higgins in the key spots. If the Jets corners are able to hold their own and buy the pass rush a little extra time to get there, Burrow does have a tendency to take some bad sacks. So there could be opportunities for this defense. But listen, this is not going to be a team the Jets are likely to shut down. That first week, the Jets played Baltimore, and they, on a play-to-play basis, were really good. There were a few busts in the second half. They controlled the line of scrimmage. Like I said, the corners played well. Not a tough matchup at the receiver position, but Jets looked really good in that game defensively, aside from a few busts. Last week was a different story. The busts were still there, but the Jets were just getting blown off the ball. They were not getting to the quarterback. And if the Jets can't get to Joe Burrow in this game, it's going to be a long day. Because, again, it's not like these guys, you could hope the corners can slow down the receivers, but the pass rush has to help them out because these receivers are too good for these corners. No matter how good the Jets' corners are, these receivers are too good for the Jets to be able to shut them down all day. And the Jets also, they have to stop the run better. They got off to a good start last week stopping the run, but it got rough. They definitely got worn down. I don't know if they got worn down near the end of the game. They shouldn't be because they're constantly rotating guys in and out. But the Jets' run defense got worse as the game progressed, and that was not a good combo. And if in a world where the Jets don't have this miracle comeback last week, I think this week would have been spent talking about just how bad the defense was and what a concern it is going forward. Well, they have a chance to silence some of the doubts this week because this is an excellent Cincinnati offense, and it's an offense that this Jets defense, in theory, is built to stop. We'll see whether they can do it in practice, but they built this defense to face an offense like the Bengals had. That was I think the mindset, because there are more teams built like the Cincinnati Bengals than there are like the Baltimore Ravens in this league. So they built it to shut down the pass. We'll see what, and they still have to stop the run, but those matchups in the passing game, they're going to be really key for the Jets. But of course, the Jets are also going to need to score points, and I had here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about how they could do that. Of course, last week the Jets had an amazing comeback, but they were helped by the Cleveland Browns. The Browns were that team on the blooper reel. You don't want to be that team, and you also don't want to be the guy on the viral YouTube video who messed up his engagement. But if you are, and say you have a boat proposal and the boat tips over and the ring ends up at the bottom of the lake, at least you know that the guys at BriteCo's Jewelry Insurance will make sure you get a replacement at the full value of the ring. No matter if it's lost, stolen, or you can't figure out what happened to it, go to brite.co/locked on. This is the fastest, easiest, and cheapest way to cover yourself with the best jewelry insurance in the business. The guys at BriteCo, they're geniuses. They made buying insurance for your engagement ring, your watch, or whatever so easy that you'll get covered in 2 minutes on your phone. And you won't find a better deal on great coverage that's super affordable. Brite.co/locked on. I know we all hate insurance, but these guys have turned the whole experience around. It's probably the easiest thing you can do for yourself this week. You got no excuses. $5 a month, you get totally comprehensive coverage, and it won't take you more than 2 minutes on your cell phone. Check it out, brite.co/locked on. And you got to see the videos. They made these hilarious videos of all these proposal fails. I mentioned the one about the guy who was in the boat that tipped over. You'll watch them. You'll find them hilarious. Again, BriteCo/locked on. Thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. This show's free and it's available on all platforms, including YouTube. When the Jets have the ball, this is an interesting spot because you look at the numbers. Joe Flacco's like one of the most statistically proficient quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think we know that's not been an indication that he's been consistently great through the first 2 weeks. Week 1 against Baltimore, he was just bad. And then he padded the stats in garbage time. Week 2 against the Browns, he was mediocre through much of the game. And then the last 2 minutes, he was Baltimore Joe Flacco again for at least 2 minutes. Part of the reason Flacco's had to throw so much, though, is that the Jets have been behind, especially in that first game. That's where he posted a lot of the numbers against Baltimore. I mean, his passing attempts were in the 50s that first week. That's not really the recipe you want if you're the Jets. Now, I think all eyes will be on Garrett Wilson this week, and it'll be interesting to see whether he can duplicate that stellar outing he had against the Cleveland Browns last week. He may have splashed onto the scene as the number 1 receiver for this Jets team, and we'll see. It's always tricky the follow-up week because now the other teams, they've seen some film on you. They figured out what you do well. You're not going to sneak up on them. Garrett Wilson's not going to sneak up on the Bengals this week. But that's where you show that you're the guy. That's where you show that you're the number 1 receiver on the team. So I think all eyes will be on Garrett Wilson, but my focus as much as anything is on the run game. Jets want to get this run game working, and I think the run game's been okay the first 2 weeks. I've been surprised that they have not committed to it to the extent I thought they would. I thought this was going to be a run-dominated offense, and it really has not been so far. And I thought, especially with the backup quarterback in there, Jets would not be so passive. Now, part of it is, the game situations, but even before they got into garbage time against Baltimore, they were throwing it about 60% of the time. And again, you got these 2 backs. You're building the offense around them. Now, it's a little complicated because you don't have what you were expecting at the tackle position. You don't have Mekhi Becton. You don't even have Dwayne Brown. You have Max Mitchell, who I don't want to get on Max Mitchell because he should not be playing this year. He's just not physically developed enough. This was supposed to be a year where he was supposed to hit the weight room. But tackle's an issue. Tight end's been an issue, if we're going to be honest. I don't want to go on another Tyler Conklin rant. He's got to be better this week. I mean, he almost he'd actually be a guy I'd pick to do well this week because things have got to even out. There's no way this guy could be this bad, right? So, the tight end position, we'll see what the Jets get out of them. But I think a lot of this game is going to come down to Michael Carter, Breece Hall. I think last week you saw maybe the first step for Breece Hall. I think people have been really kind of down on him since the preseason. He had a rough game against Atlanta. In fairness to him, though, he was running behind a backup offensive line. The Jets did not play their starters in that game except for the rookies. And ever since then, it seems like the hype really died down around him. Last week, he broke a few runs. He showed that speed. And what was interesting last week is everybody has had this mindset that Carter, because he's smaller, was going to be the outside runner and Breece Hall was going to be the inside runner. Well, last week the Jets did things a little bit differently. Carter was the thunder. He was the guy who ran inside, and they designed a lot of outside runs for Breece Hall, which kind of makes sense because Hall's the guy who actually has the breakaway speed. Even though Carter's a little undersized, he's actually a tough runner inside. Hall's got the tools to be the whole package. He can be an inside runner. He can be an outside runner. I think last week he took the first steps toward becoming a key part of this offense because the Jets really worked him into the game plan. I like the way they used him. You even got some packages where Carter and Hall were on the field at the same time, which I'd like to see more of. I think that's I think Michael LaFleur did a good job utilizing the talent on his team. But I think the Jets want to get this run game working. I don't think he won another game on Flacco's shoulders. Listen, nothing but respect for what Joe Flacco did last week. He turned back the clock the last 2 minutes. And even before then, he was not the reason the Jets were losing that game. I mean, he wasn't great. He was playing okay. He was doing decent things. He's still limited at this point. He can't really move. More than his inability to move, he's not going to throw. I mean, he's not making tight window throws. He's throwing to guys who are wide open. He's not going to try and challenge a defense. And that really limits the upside of your passing game. So I think that the Jets need to make it up on the ground. I think they need an efficient ground game. And I think they need to make big plays on the ground. And of the 2 backs, Hall is the guy who has the breakaway speed. And these backs are also going to be important because, as I mentioned, Flacco's not really a guy who likes to challenge a defense at this point of his career. That first week especially, you saw lots of checkdowns to the running back. So you'd like to see them in space make make plays. I think in some ways the passing game is going to be an extension of the run game, because if Flacco continues the propensity to check things down, and last week Garrett Wilson was getting open so much that Flacco actually was willing to throw the ball a little bit further down the field, but it was because Garrett Wilson was giving him such big windows. So hopefully Garrett Wilson, going back to him, hopefully he has a big game. But as much as it's going to be Breece Hall and Michael Carter on the ground, you also want to see what they do after the catch, because both of them are proficient catchers. Hopefully the Jets stop using Ty Johnson. I mean, the Jets were using Ty Johnson a lot in passing situations last week, and I've been saying it for over a year. The guy's not somebody who has tools to be an effective passing down back in this league. He's not a good blocker, doesn't have good hands, doesn't run good routes. Hall and Carter both have good hands, and they both have the ability to turn the ball upfield, make plays after the catch. So I look for Garrett Wilson, but I also think if the Jets win this game, we're going to see that their running backs had a big role in it. Now, ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, I'll offer some final thoughts as we head towards this Week 3 game between the Jets and the Bengals. That's wrapping up this Friday episode of Locked On Jets. Well, I'm sure you were thrilled last week if you laid money down on the Jets. Not only did you get an exciting victory, but you made money because they won the game and they beat the spread. You should know that if you want to bet on football this season, BetOnline.net is your number one source. Find all of the latest player developments, team matchups, news and podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Friday, previewing Week 3 action. The Jets take on the Cincinnati Bengals Sunday at MetLife Stadium. I think a lot of this game is going to come down to how the Jets start. Week 1 against Baltimore, they actually started okay. They were in the game at halftime. Week 2 against Cleveland, again, they were right there with the Browns. They kept going back and forth. They just couldn't get the lead until the last minute, but they felt like the Browns kept scoring, the Jets kept tying, and the Browns kept reclaiming the lead right after. So the Jets have kind of put behind the slow starts from a year ago. We hope that trend continues. Yesterday I talked with the guys from Locked On Bengals. We did our Thursday crossover show, and they said it. I think they made a great point. They said, Jets get off to a good start in this game. The crowd starts roaring. This could be a tough game. This could be a tricky game for the Bengals. And when the schedule came out, I looked at this game and I said, that's the one game I just don't have a lot of faith in the Jets. And as much as it was the Jets, it's really about the Bengals, because last year the Bengals came into MetLife Stadium. Let's be honest, they probably looked past the Jets. They played. There was a trap game for them. They played very complacently. They were coming off a big win. Maybe they were reading their own headlines, and they were shocked. And I said, the Bengals objectively are a team with more talent than the Jets. I don't think that that's an unfair statement. I don't think that that's really saying anything negative about the Jets. The Bengals were a team that went to the Super Bowl a year ago. They're the more talented team. So any Jets victory is going to require the Bengals to not play their A game. And the odds of the Bengals, I felt like, not playing their A game heading into the season, Week 3, were low because of what happened last year. There was given plenty of motivation. All Zach Taylor would have to do was just remind his team what happened last Halloween when they thought they had an easy win over the Jets playing a backup quarterback. This Bengals team, though, has surprised us the first 2 weeks because they haven't played well. And again, I think they're going to figure it out, but maybe they won't. And maybe doubt will start to creep into their heads. MetLife Stadium, if the Jets jump out to a 7-0 lead, a 10-0 lead, maybe this is the type of game the Jets can get away from the Bengals. Alternatively, if the Bengals go right down the field, first drive of the game, 7 plays, score a touchdown, they're going to start feeling better about themselves. And that's the thing. I feel like when you're in a situation like Cincinnati and your team's struggling, sometimes you just need one play. Sometimes you just need one drive. It causes everybody to calm down. Playing from ahead. The Bengals haven't had a lead this season. So I think if the Bengals start off well, they go down the field, they'll be able to relax. They'll finally have a lead. They're not going to be chasing the game. But if the Jets can get the lead early, and this is not brilliant, this is not genius analysis saying who you need to play well early, but I think it might be more important in this game than it is in your typical game, just because of the way these teams are entering. The Bengals particularly, you wonder where their heads are at. You wonder what their confidence level is right now. It's an opportunity for the Jets to take advantage of. And it's an opportunity that maybe we were not expecting heading into the season. Again, I thought, looking at the schedule, I said, that's the one game I just don't see it for the Jets. But things change in 2 weeks. And things have changed, and we'll see what the Jets have in store for us on Sunday. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. Big shout out to subscribers to the podcast. If you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening. You'll get notifications as new episodes are posted, so you'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. Watching on YouTube, please give the show a big thumbs up. Have a great weekend, everybody. Enjoy the game.